welcome to another episode of Noise to Music, where we take the noise in our life and we turn it into wonderful and beautiful music, a melody. Interestingly enough, just on the name, a lot of people ask me, how did you get to the name? What does the name represent? So I was reading something by Jordan Peterson. He was talking about the balance between order and chaos and how both extremes really can't work. You need order and you need chaos, but either one exclusively is not healthy. So noise to music is really the idea of, there's so much noise in our life, there's so much movement, there's so many things that we kind of can't get a grasp on. We want to harness them and turn them, if you will, into some beautiful symphony. All right, today's topic, we're going to be talking about, a little bit of an offshoot, a little bit different. We're going to be talking about raising happy children. Now, I know that a lot of the people that listen to the podcast are not necessarily married, however, or not there yet, God willing, will be there. But I am always of the opinion, and this is how I always have taught these specific topics, that raising good children and having a healthy home is always starts from you. The person that you are is the child that you will raise. So regardless of whether it's practical for you for today, so to speak, but becoming that person is definitely practical for you for today, because that's the tool that will build the future. So we're going to talk about raising happy children, and we're going to talk about 6 fundamentals. We're only going to tend to 3 in this class, and we'll, God willing, have another podcast dealing with the other 3. So first of all, let's just put this into perspective, is most parents are, their biggest concern is raising happy children. It's one of the things that occupies the parents' minds and time and thought more than almost anything else, because everything that we do essentially is for that purpose, so that our children are happy, so that they're nurtured in the right way, so that they're productive. That's our biggest sense of joy. And also on the flip side, parents' biggest sense of discomfort or anguish. Everything could be great, but if their children's lives are not panning out, then, almost nothing is great, so to speak. Okay, which within itself needs a necessity of balance, which we could talk about at another time, right? That's the whole idea of identity and identifying ourselves as parents. Okay, but what is the goal? What is the idea between building happy, children? What's it all about? So happier kids are more likely to turn into successful and accomplished adults. When they're happy, when they're balanced, when they're moving in the right direction, clearly the odds are in their favor of turning into successful and accomplished people. Christine Carter, PhD, she writes, happiness is a tremendous advantage in a world that emphasizes performance. On average, happy people are more successful than unhappy people. Right? You have a person who's happy and unhappy. The happy person will generally be more successful. They get better performance reviews, have more prestigious jobs, and earn higher salaries. They're more likely to get married, and once married, they're more satisfied with their marriage and to stay married. Because when you're happy with something, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So happiness is, training our children for happiness is a major tool in their war chest to be able to succeed. Okay, so what's the first step? The first of the 6 that we're going to talk about. The first one is get happy yourself. The first step to happier children is ironically a little bit selfish. It's all about being happy yourself. Why is that? So once again, we'll refer to Christine Carter. She writes that extensive research has been established that there's a link between parents who feel depressed and negative outcomes and their children. Meaning parental depression actually seems to cause behavioral problems in children. It also, that there's another point that it makes the parenting less effective. But the first step is when a parent is depressed, when the parent is not happy, then that will be a link to a behavioral problem, because we'll talk about it a little bit later on. Seemingly we might say, what's the link? If I'm not happy, what does that have to do with the child? The answer is really a child does not have the tools to translate any negativity into anything other than this is my fault. They're not sophisticated enough to say, the parent is having a hard day and thereby, that's why it's happening. The child will automatically say, this must somehow have to do because of me. This is somehow my fault. I don't know why it is. That's why you see, and we'll talk about it later, when parents fight, the child translates it into themselves, and as opposed to a parent who says, hey, it's okay. We disagree. It's normal. No, the child really translates it into their fault, and that's point number one. Why our personal happiness as parents makes such a difference. The second thing is also it makes the parenting less effective because you clearly have less patience. Your bandwidth is smaller. Less time to listen and be there and see it in an objective way. We're more translated. Whatever's going on in our mind is how we'll translate what we see in the child's life, for better or for worse. So the first step is really getting happy yourself. So working on ourselves to become better people is effectively one of the best tools to creating happy children. Okay, it's kind of like the idea we've spoken about in the past where you need to love yourself in order to love others. Now, what does that have to do with each other? I mean, I could love something else and not love myself. The answer is that the way that we see the world is always through the lens of what's going on in our mind. If there's chaos, if there's disorganization, if there's anxiety in our mind, those are the glasses that we wear to see the world. That's how you see the world. That's why if you've had a long day, you have less of a bandwidth, you have less capability to be patient. What does that have to do with anything? Because that's what's going on in your mind. So similarly, just like you can't love others if you don't love yourself, you can't be happy and positive for your children if you're not in that place. So the first step is get happy yourself. Step number 2 of raising happy children is being present with our children. Research has shown that kids who are raised by parents who are always there for them no matter what are more successful in life than kids who are raised by parents who are not present. That's because being present creates a sense of trust in a child. They kind of get the feeling of like, hey, there's someone to lean on. I could take this risk. I can make this move. It's not so bad. There's a backup. Okay, they have a tendency to have more successful relationships when they grow up because you were present for them. You gave them that feeling of you're there with them. So what are some practical, advice for that? We're going to go after the phone. Put away your phone when you're with your kids. You're talking to your children. You don't have to always be present. You're entitled to have your own life. You're entitled to be busy. And it's, when you are talking to your child, then you should put away your phone. Meaning don't be scrolling down or answering texts or talk while you're talking to someone else while your children are asking you a question. It's okay to tell your child, hey, I can't talk right now. Okay, that's the second point, which is say no so that you can say yes. It's okay to tell your child, like, right now is not a good time. Let's talk at 5 o'clock. Give me half an hour and then I'm all yours. That will, instead of being there halfway while you're driving and dealing with something at work and listening and you're filling out some type of form on the computer. You understand what I'm trying to get at. The point is, like, being present for our children is, not learning how to say no to other things and just focusing on them for whatever time frame that requires. So another point, being present with our child, is just look at every moment with our children as a gift. Remember those days when you were single, when you waited to build a home. Remember when you waited to find someone. Remember when you waited for the child. Well, now you have it. What are you doing with that? There's a song that always kind of gets me emotional when I listen to it. It's called Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin. It's a song put out in the 70s. Okay, it's a story about the son growing up, with his father, and when he's young, the father says, the son tells the father, "Hey, let's spend some time together." And the father always says, "I'm busy." Then the father gets old, and the child the father says to the child, hey, let's spend some time together. And the son kind of says, hey, now I'm busy. Do you know what I mean? And it's really like that. This song kind of makes you realize how important it is to appreciate the sense of now with our children. All right. And remember, you don't have to be present all the time. But when you decide to be present, really be present. So it says where do we find this in the Torah? Ethics of our fathers, Pirkei Avot, right? Im lo achshav ematai. If not now, then when? There's a value to now. There's a moment called now. We think about our past, we plan our future, but the challenge that we have in our generation is the now. And I'll go out there on a limb and even etch this into the podcast and record it. I'm not so sure there's a reason that we as parents have to have, let's just say, Instagram or TikTok or whatever it might be on our phones. I understand we need it for business. I even understand that we need to communicate with it. I'm not talking about deleting it and deleting your account. But I am saying if you need it, if you want to kind of check out and be informed and all that, have it on your computer. Why do we need our phones to be such an integral part of our every moment? Okay, and think about that for a minute. Try living without Instagram on your phone. I'm not saying you shouldn't have it. Have it on your computer, but on your phone. That's the power of now, okay, with our children. So that was the second point. The third is expect effort, not perfection. Okay, we need to build our children, not that perfection or what they accomplish is the medium of success, but effort is. All right, and this is kind of a note to helicopter parents, which in my 20 years of educating has been one of the most one of the things that has really stunted the growth of children the most. That parents don't allow their children to make mistakes. They don't allow the children to kind of lead the path. They just want everything to be perfect and be ahead of the game for them. And then the child is basically either grows up with resentment or they grow up with the sense of like non-accomplishment because they've never taken a risk and failed before. So the key is really to praise effort. Praise the effort of the child, okay? Majority of children that are praised for their intelligence, believe it or not, choose the easy route out. But a child that's praised for their effort is okay to step up to the challenge. All right? So what we want to do is you want to find the effort in your child. You want to identify the child's capabilities and nurture them wherever they might go, because in life that's their identity and that's what they will use. Okay, as opposed to, oh, you got a 97 on the test, I'm so excited for you, and the child that got the 80, gets the hug, you're good too. No, which one worked harder? The one that got the 97 didn't study at all, and they're just a natural genius. Okay, what are you telling them? You're not telling them to work. You're not teaching them to work hard. The child that sweat and worked hard and they got the 80, so to speak. That's the effort that's going to make them succeed. I've been involved in numerous situations where I've had to hire people for different things I was involved with, and the thing that I look for the most is generally the effort. The knowledge. I'll fill in the void for what you don't know in the company or the business. Are you a hard worker? You don't have to be brilliant, because brilliance without effort doesn't have as much value. But effort, you're going to work hard, you're going to try and understand it, you're going to try and make things work. That is actually the tool that, every person, who has a business really wants to find. So in our children, we want to nurture that. It's the effort. Don't give up. That kind of thing. In fact, and where do we find this in the Torah? So Judaism judges us by our effort, not by our accomplishment. We don't get judged by how much we accomplish. We get judged by how much effort we put in. For example, the Torah teaches us that the leader after Moshe Rabbeinu, after Moses, was Joshua. And in fact, there were many, the sages explained that there were many people that were smarter than him. and higher up on the ranks. But he was the person that put in the most effort to be closer to Moshe Rabbeinu. He waited for Moshe Rabbeinu by the mountain to come down. No one else did. When they would finish studying, he would organize, clean up, fix everything before and after. He put in the effort, and that effort was what God was looking for. And God said, hey, you're the next in line. All right. Where do we find this additionally in Pirkei Avot? Ezu gibor hakovesh et yitzro. Who is mighty? Someone that conquers their inclination. That's what we want to teach our children, the perseverance and strength. The pasuk in Mishlei says, Tov erech hapayim megibor. Someone who's patient is more powerful, is better than someone who's strong. Umoshel berucho bilikod ir. And someone who's able to control their character, someone who's able to not get into a fit of rage and lose themselves, is more powerful than someone that can conquer a city. Okay, and that's what we want to teach our children. But let's go back to let's circle back and say, you have to be that way, I have to be that way, we have to be that way. It's not enough just to preach it. If your child sees you in a difficult and trying situation on the spot, and instead of losing yourself and yelling and screaming and cursing and all that, they see that you controlled yourself, you put an effort into it, all right? That's what you're teaching them. Same thing with work. Teaching our children, hey, guess what? I tried and I failed, and guess what? I tried again afterwards. Praising effort, showing them effort in our life, not necessarily perfection. That is what will take our children the long way. Okay, we'll go forward with step number 4, which is teaching optimism. How do we actually get to this point where our children see, the world in such a positive way? So, firstly, we have to understand that optimism is so closely related to happiness that the two can practically be equated. All right? An optimistic child, they're more successful at work, at athletics, at school. They're healthier because they see the world as a positive place. They end up more satisfied with their marriages and their friendships. Things are just better and more beautiful. They're less likely to deal with depression and anxiety. And how do we install that in our children? So just a little sprinkle of that would be the power of emunah. Belief provides our children with emotional stability. Okay? When a child has emunah in their life, and when a child sees God, when a child knows that there's a being that's caring for them above and beyond who they are, then that child is able to be optimistic. And optimism is so important. You always want to be around someone that's optimistic, right? You don't want to be around someone that sees the world in such a negative way. You always want to be around, you want your friends to be optimistic. How do we choose that? But you know what? Guess what? The world is really a dark place. Without spirituality, without God, where is the world headed? Chaos. So many times throughout history, we see that time and time again, from a financial perspective, from a safety perspective, from a health perspective. How did you get through COVID without seeing God? The world was about to implode. You know how? You know that God's running the show. So when we live that way and we show that to our children, that is a place for optimism and simplicity. Okay, so we'll stop here. There are a few more points we'll get into the next podcast, so just kind of stay tuned. Once again, thanks for joining, and I look forward to your comments.